Welcome to Booked All Night, the podcast for book lovers and writers looking for insightful discussions on the latest releases. I'm your host, Jessica Mary, and I'm joined weekly by Leigh and Magdalyn Ann as we geek out over books and the craft of writing. This week, we're continuing our discussion on Death at Mourning House by best-selling author MAUREEN JOHNSON, which by the time this episode goes out should be published already. We're recording way back in June, so we're excited to finally get this out. So, my little Libernauts, buckle up, settle in, and let's launch on this literary adventure together. I feel like there should be a small recap. We tried to do it at the end of last episode, but I ended up cutting it for time because it was almost an hour long. But the first 10 chapters we went through last episode, and just to get caught up before we hop into the discussion of up to chapter 20, Marlowe set a house on fire, which I feel is very important to mention at all times because Marlowe mentions it at all times. She was dating a girl named Akila, but, then she set a house on fire, and so she's pretty certain that they are broken up now. She gets banished / recruited to a tourist island for Mourning House up on the US-Canada border. And most of what we saw in the first 10 chapters was very slice of lifey, and also Marlowe simping on literally every girl that she works with. Which brings us to chapters 11 through 20, which is actually 14 chapters worth of stuff because of the 1932 timeline, which in this chunk got so much attention.
It did. We learned a lot about the 1932 kids and family and
there's this one we definitely learned a lot about Max, where we get to hear all of the the staff stories, right? And they're all like, oh, I know that he did it on purpose and he pushed me down the stairs, or he left that toy there, or he hits me, he cuts me, he screams at me. And then through this section we do finally get that Max is a psycho.
I think he's quite a psycho as he is just an undisciplined child.
I went back and forth on that, but I think ultimately that he is showing signs of being a psychopath because he does actively hurt people, right? He pushes some of them. He's pushed more than one maid down a flight of stairs.
Really get reprimanded as much. So he thinks it's okay to do. So maybe it's a little bit of both, because when you see a child doing something they shouldn't be doing, you can't just be like, oh, you shouldn't do that, ha ha ha. It should be more of a reprimand. And Max doesn't get that because Max is the biological child of Ralston and his wife.
Yeah.
So I feel that it might be a little bit of both, because he's not getting reprimanded. He's developing that this is okay, this is funny, this is what I'm going to do because I get attention from it.
I mean, that's fair.
Because the staff can't really say anything to him because they're working for the family. They don't have any say of correcting the child. And then we know how Father Ralston, I forget his first name.
So do I. It's Dr. Creepface as far as I'm concerned, because he goes on very lengthy rants about eugenics.
Right, but Dr. Ralston makes excuses for it. Oh, he's just learning. Oh, he's just experimenting. Oh, he's just doing this. And the mother Ralston, if you will, it's just oh, he's such a terrible child, but I'm going to coddle him because he's my child, sort of thing. Although she loves all the children and she's very nice to them and they love her too, but that's her child. And I don't want to sound rude, but, it's a little bit different sometimes, even if you're trying not to make it different.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be some times where you favor your biological child over your adoptive children. And unfortunately, no matter, and I'm sure there's different cases for everyone, but no matter how hard you try, there is going to be some that peaks out here and there. And I feel that's what happens with Max.
I want to back up to something that you said about Dr. Ralston, who is oh, he's a kid and he can get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was really weird because he's so into eugenics and he's got a few like paragraphs worth of dialogue where he's talking about, the benefits of it and how we'd be able to breed better people. And so I mean, like, that's the eugenics movement, is the idea, plus, a shit ton of racism, but that's
Yes.
the whole different podcast. But I felt that was really weird that he was so blinded by his biology, I guess. In the case of Max, right? Because coming up later, we find out about other biological issues.
Yes.
But for Max, he's like, no, this is fine. This is acceptable. He's a child. But for everybody else, he's like, no, we're breeding. And we're breeding better behavior and better people and smarter humans and disease resistance and blah, 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 blah. And it just, I don't know, like, it didn't ring true that he would look at Max and be like, okay, this kid pushed at least 10 maids, right, down the stairs. And that's perfectly acceptable.
It's perfectly acceptable because it's his child. And he is the perfect specimen. He eats the right foods. He works out the right amount of, times. He's very smart. He does this. So I feel it's more like if this was any other child, he would be like, oh, no, we must wipe them out. Whereas it's his child, and he'll just grow into it. It's okay. He'll grow into being the best he can. This is just him being a little rebellious and a child, because it's his other children are perfect. His other adoptive children are perfect. And therefore, Max will just grow into being perfect because it's his child.
Right. But then there's the whole issue of swimming, where he admits that, like, Max isn't perfect enough.
Right.
Because he's 4, Max is 4, maybe 5 years old, and he hasn't learned to swim yet. And he's like, no, you have to be able to swim, and you have to be able to do it, perfectly. And that's why the girls take him out on the boat. And then Clara pushes him off.
Yes.
And so there's also this behavior going on with the other Ralston children. This extreme, like, you either do it or you're a failure kind of mentality of, like, you're going to swim or you're going to come out with us and you're going to keep this secret. Or in the later case, you're going to drug your entire household and murder your brother, which, like, again, was just, like, such a huge jump.
But we also know that Clara is very rebellious in her own right, because we find out very early on that she, behind her parents' backs, she smokes, she drinks, she, eats sweets. She, when she's at her private boarding school, she doesn't stick to the diet that her father wants. She eats pancakes. Right. I think, does Unity? I think one of the girls tries to.
I think Unity might be the only one that, like, fully kind of stands her father.
Right. She's kind of on board.
Yeah.
And she's always commenting on the older brother and Clara's habit of drinking and smoking, and, you shouldn't be doing that. And when they say, oh, it's just sweets, it's just this. Oh, no, we can't have that. But Clara is very rebellious, so her throwing her brother off into the water to learn how to swim the hard way, basically, is kind of on par with who she is. Her dad's not there. He's not looking. Just throw him in.
There's also, like, the whole 1932 timeline in this section has so many smoking guns and red herrings, and Clara's one of them, especially that scene where she pushes Max overboard. I'm like, okay, so all of the children are just psychopaths, right? Because they're like, hey, don't push him over. But neither of the other two girls that are there, there's Victory and Unity and Clara that are on the boat, I believe. They don't jump in to get him.
No, they just yell. Well, I think Unity just yells at Clara.
They just yell at Clara, like, oh, what are you doing? And
yeah,
it's weird because they are so active in other respects of their lives, right? Something happens and they'll stand up and say something, or they'll, do their fitness. They have this whole set routine. They have each of their unique talents that they go out for. And in this instance, like, all of them know how to swim. It's canonical. They all know how to swim. Clara is the strongest swimmer, I believe.
Yes. Olympic bound, basically.
Yes.
She's Father Ralston wants her to go to the Olympics.
Yes.
For swimming.
Yes.
And also just the whole scene that you just mentioned is set up to make you think that Clara did want Max gone.
Mm-hmm.
You're made to believe, at least with everything from chapter 1 up until the scene and further on, that Clara doesn't like Max. She thinks he's a brat. He thinks basically that he's the weakest link of the family, and therefore, we're led to believe that she doesn't want him around. She needs to take him out because he's gonna ruin everything.
Yeah, and it's one of Clara's points of view that we actually do learn about the, he's pushed down all these maids, he's hurt these people, he's thrown hot food on them, and it's Clara that learns about the extent to which he has gotten away with. So it's not just what the other children see, where they're like, oh, well, he got sweets and we don't get sweets. He gets to scream at the table. We don't get to scream at the table. He can stay up a little later, even though he's like 4, but we have to be on this very strict regimen. She's learning about
everything that's being swept under the rug.
Oh, yeah. And there is a scene not long after the chapter where Clara learns that, I'm going to call him a psycho because I think he's a psycho.
Go for it.
Yeah, he's a psycho. 4-year-old psycho, as diagnosed by Dr. Jess. But she takes a knife and drops it in her lap from the dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
And some time goes by. We don't actually see that knife again until one of Aunt Dagmar's points of view, which actually happens outside of this particular discussion.
Yes.
Yeah. But
I can't wait to get to. I can't wait to get to that part.
Oh, man, that was such a... I got things I need to say. It's bad enough.
Absolutely.
So it is bad enough when we review books that don't come out for a while that I can't go on social media and either blast it or just complain or even talk about my thoughts, right? Because there's like review etiquette. We don't want to spoil the whole thing months before it actually comes out.
Right.
And some publishers will even have like a review embargo, right? Like you can't put a review out until a week before it comes up or a week after or whatever. And there are things in those last 10 chapters that I need to talk about, and I can't on any platform that matters, right? I can only do it in conversations with you and Maggie.
I mean, my texts are open if you want to discuss those.
I'm gonna, after we're done recording today, it's gonna be like, these crazy kids. Oh my god.
And their dog. No.
And their dog too. But jumping out of 1932, Dr. Henson goes missing.
Just gone.
She's just gone. And it's
no
really
one
weird
can find
because
her.
Yeah, nobody can find her, but it's really weird because, I mean, it's not weird. I think it was done very well because Dr. Henson's very standoffish. She's very private. She's very like, you are there, I am here, I hate children, goodbye.
Only contact me if it's an emergency and necessary.
Yes, and she says that frequently. Like every time she's in, she's like, I'm getting myself some ice cream. And they'll be like, oh, hey, how was your day? And she's like, it is not an emergency, get away from me.
I just want ice cream.
I just want ice cream, get away from me. And she does, so she disappears. Nobody notices until that student comes by, and the student is supposed to have a meeting with her. And she's like, hey, I can't get in touch with her. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll walkie-talkie her, and she'll maybe talk to us. And then like a few hours goes by, and she hasn't talked to them. And then they finally go up. She's not in her office, and it's a while before they decide she's missing.
Yeah, and I just want to point out also is that she makes them aware that the student who's doing this research with her is going to be there and to contact her when she shows up. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like this random student shows up. She's like, no, this person's coming by and you need to contact me when she does. So they literally, all they say is literally like, hey, the student's here. That's it.
Yep.
and nothing. No response,
Yeah,
nothing.
there's no, but like, I don't know that they contact Dr. Henson for anything else prior to that she actually responds to them on the walkie outside of like Marlowe getting brought to her office one day.
Right.
And everything that's done on the walkie is very, something's here, and then Dr. Henson's like, awesome, shut up. Like, just moves on, like.
Me if I was in charge of a bunch of teens.
Yeah. There's a, who was it? I think it's Tom. Tom is like, I really respect the way she despises it. It's Van. I really respect the way that she despises us when she finds them in the pool all swimming together.
Yes. Yeah.
And that, which is when she says, like, there's a student coming tomorrow. Make sure you let me know when they get here. I'm like, okay. Do you want to be here when they get here? Like,
right.
And then there's, of course, the goose chase going on, and they're like, well, the water ski is here, and the...
and I like how Marlowe is like, I know she doesn't want us to, like, go into her room, but I'm doing it. I'm going to knock. I'm going to, see if she's all right.
Not
and
just
she's
knock.
Right.
But, like, her and Riki spelunk down into her room.
Well, I think that's after. So I think Marlowe goes and knocks on her door at first. Mm-hmm. And there's no answer. And she's like, okay, well, maybe she's not in her room. And then hours have gone by. They're all searching for her. And I think that's when Marlowe and Riki, Mission Impossible into the room.
And it is hilarious that they get one of the emergency fire ladders. And they throw it over the balcony and then kind of swing over, and neither one of them is really trained or equipped to actually do that. And they're just...
Which I like. Yeah. I like that. It's not like, oh, we're so good at everything we do in this book.
They were so clumsy. I'm like, they are going to fall. They are going to get hurt. And so they finally get back in there, and then they get all of the research, right? They steal the research is what they do.
And her camera.
And, well, they don't take the camera.
No, they notice... Is it that they notice the camera is missing?
I think that happens later. That... yeah. Once they realize the camera is missing, that's when Marlowe is like, did we take the camera? No. Was the camera there?
I think the camera was there.
Yeah.
And Marlowe thinks about looking at it or whatever, and she's like, nah.
Yeah, because when it goes missing, Marlowe is like, no, it was there. Wasn't it there? I think it was there.
Yeah.
Like yeah. She's got a definite, thought process about it, about whether or not that camera was important, whether they took it, whether they talked about taking it. And then it shows up later in Riki's room.
Yes.
And that's part of the whole Scooby-Doo nonsense that I talked about last episode. Yeah. I thought that whole Mission Impossible scene getting into the room, Riki is like high on caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's very, very strung out. She's like, I gotta know what she knew. She clearly discovered something, and somebody took her for it. And this whole section where they're like, oh, Dr. Henson is clearly dead. I'm like, she's just not there for a day. Like,
right.
I felt that there was some very immediate overreaction, and that comes again later too. At the end of our discussion, Marlowe finds a tooth, and she's like, oh my god, Dr. Henson's definitely been murdered. And so as I was saying before we started recording, I've been reading a lot of YA horror lately, and there are these huge jumps to conclusions. And I felt like I needed at least another day or so to really be like, something nefarious has really happened to Dr. Henson, or to have seen a blood stain or some sign of a struggle in her room or something to really get it going that this woman had been murdered, as opposed to she's not there, she didn't answer a walkie-talkie, and it's been like a day.
That it's part of Marlowe's character to do such things, because when she burnt down the house and Akila went to get a new job, she's like, oh, Akila hates me, we're no longer together. That was her immediate reaction. Now, the other teenagers are like, oh, we should check the main land to see if maybe she went into town to get some supplies. And they're like, well, she doesn't normally do that, but let's check anyway. So they've got the heads on their shoulders. They're like, let's check every possibility. Let's check everywhere we can before we rule anything out. And Marlowe's the one going, she's dead. She's gone. She's dead, you know? And I think, though, and you're right, in other books, they probably do jump to ridiculous conclusions too fast. But I think Marlowe is set up that way from the very beginning to jump to these crazy conclusions, such as she's dead.
Yeah, I still don't like it. Like,
yeah. Oh, I get it. I get it.
Like, I just wanted there to be just a little bit more, because then later on she does jump to conclusion after conclusion after conclusion after conclusion. And that felt overboard to me, no pun intended. Right, because then they're like, oh, Dr. Henson clearly went out like skimboarding or something. And I'm like, when has this woman ever...
And that's what they say. They said, when have we ever seen her on a paddleboard? And they're just like, well, we should just try to see if that's what she did.
Yeah.
You know, because they want to cover their bases. And again, from the very beginning, Marlowe's like that. And maybe it does get a little overbearing. And I can see your point. But yeah, I think Marlowe, you can kind of excuse it in this book because she literally thinks Akila hates her and never wants to talk to her again without even communicating with her.
Because she lit a house. It's very important because she mentions that at every possible turn, that Akila hates her because she set a house on fire.
And no one trusts her because she set a house on fire.
Because she set a house on fire.
But yeah, I definitely see that. And then is this also when they're looking in the room, is this also when Marlowe discovers the yoga mat is gone?
Yes. So the yoga mat, I think, was like a really good clue and little herring for a little bit, that the yoga mat was not where Dr. Henson normally had the yoga mat, and there was the outline from the rain in the morning, meaning that she was there to do her yoga, because that's one of the only things that she really gives you about her schedule, is that every day at dawn she does her yoga on that balcony there. Do not disturb her.
Right. And Marlowe apparently knows, I guess, where she keeps her yoga mat afterwards, because that's where she checks.
Yeah, I think Dr. Henson told her outright that like that's where she keeps her yoga. She always puts it like back in the closet or wherever. And so when
in her room on a different floor.
Yes.
Because that's important too.
Yes.
She goes up to the higher level floor to do her yoga. She brings her mat back down to her room to put it away.
Yes. And that's when they sneak in and Marlowe sees that it's not where it is, but she disregards it. And so this is kind of one of those, like, it doesn't always add up that Marlowe jumps to conclusions, because here we see that it's not where it's supposed to be. And this isn't the thing that makes her go, oh, she's definitely been murdered. It's finding a tooth later, right? They're getting ready. There's a huge storm coming in. She kind of like trips. By this point, they are notably missing a tarp.
Yes.
The yoga mat, and the camera. And Marlowe trips and finds a tooth. The tooth is what sets her off. But I'm like, you have 100+ tourists come every day?
Yeah, but doesn't she find it in the rubble where they like destroyed the patio that Clara fell off onto? Like it's underneath of that. But she doesn't notate that they're missing a tarp. Like that's not a big deal either to her.
Yes.
And like, of course, in my mind, I'm going, oh, that tarp. Oh, that tarp. You know, and she's just like, yeah, we're missing a tarp, and I found a tooth. Like, focus on the tarp, girl. Focus on the tarp.
Right. And that's my thing. Like, I feel like, focusing on we're missing a tarp, we're missing a person. Huh. That could be suspicious.
Oh, and another thing at this point was that a customer during one of the tours complained about a smell coming from a bathroom.
Yes. The
And it
smell in the
and it
bathroom.
wasn't just bathroom smell, like normal bathroom smell.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, very lingery.
Right. And like these things, I wish she had focused on more.
But she didn't.
But she didn't. It was the tooth that really absolutely set her off. And she was like, oh, this is clearly Dr. Henson's. Somebody on this island is clearly a murderer. And again, I'm like, there's 100+ tourists that come to this island. Up until this point, there really wasn't something that said it is definitely one of the other 5 teenagers that are here with you.
Right.
Until Marlo made that connection.
And these tourists want to see the patio.
Yes.
A lot of them want to see where Clara died.
Mm-hmm.
So they're gonna go to the patio. So of course, who knows? Maybe a kid's tooth is loose.
And that's my thing. Like maybe a kid's tooth was loose, and our first thought was, okay, Dr. Henson's definitely dead. And I was like, this is what did it for you? And I talked about a book I was reading. I have reviewed it. It's up. It's scheduled. Where the main character's friend comes back from school. He's got a little scab on his chin, and he has some blood on his cuff. And the main character is just like, "Oh my god, he killed his parents." And I feel the same way about this tooth. That we just took such an astronomical jump off of something that wasn't necessarily big enough to even springboard, and there were other things that she could have focused on that could have tied that together. And so while, yes, Marlo is definitely the kind to be like, oh my god, I burned a house down and my girlfriend broke up with me. I feel like I burned a house down and Akila saying I'm going to get a new job, and Akila also not reaching out and talking to her after that could lead into believing that they had broken up. Whereas I found a tooth in the grass leading to Dr. Henson has been murdered didn't add up.
Right. I think that is a really big stretch. But again, I feel like the author just wanted Marlo to be like that.
Mm-hmm. It is time to talk about everybody in the Ralston house being drugged the morning Max died.
Oh, yay.
Oh my god. So there are 3 or so chapters in there, and everybody's waking up, and they're like, why am I asleep in the middle of the afternoon? I really liked that everyone was off of their schedule. Everyone was really confused. Not a single person was like, oh, I must have taken a nap. They were all like, why am I asleep? My shoes are still on. My dress or my swimsuit is still on. What the hell happened?
Yes. And they know that it wasn't just the heat of the island. They're like, as you said, this isn't right. I must have been drugged.
One of Victory's viewpoints is it starts with, wasn't she supposed to be awake? She's very confused about sleeping in the middle of the afternoon, and no, this wasn't right. It was day. Victory Ralston was too well drilled in her routine to accept this. With some effort, she pushed herself up onto her elbows. Something was wrong. She blinked, looked at her clock, the table next to her bed. It was almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Why was she asleep? No one slept through the afternoon in the Ralston family. And it goes on like that, where she's like, well, am I sick? I still have my shoes on,
And it wasn't just the family. It was the staff too. Every single person who was in that house was asleep.
Mm-hmm. Like,
insane.
I loved it. It is insane.
I didn't see that turn coming at all. I'm just like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What happened?
Right? And I thought that was such a great... It's gonna make me sound like a psycho myself, but I thought that was a really great way to get away with murder. Everybody in the house is asleep.
Right. So
And
no one saw anything.
nobody saw anything until somebody comes bragging to Daddy, but that is a
Past
different
chapter
chapter,
20.
and I can't talk about it because it is past chapter 20. And I'm
But
trying to
that should
stay
be a
on
hint enough.
right. It was so nuts.
But yeah, that's when I thought that this book was getting so good, because the beginning, the first, it was fine. It was good. I enjoyed it, but it was just like I needed something a little bit more. And then Dr. Henson went missing, and I was just like, okay, now we're spicing things up. And then this happened, and I was like, oh, I just want to keep reading. I need to know what happens. This was the point where I was just like, I'm invested. I need to know.
Yes, this is where a lot of my stars for my review came from, was this whole section, because a lot of the Ralstons get their own section. You get to know them, you see how they feel about their family, their extended family, some more family secrets. You learn about Max, you learn about people thinking he's a brat, how far certain family members are willing to go, how outspoken some of them are for eugenics, against eugenics, and
Yeah.
it definitely, I don't know, I want to read a book all about the Ralstons.
Yes. I actually, I believe I said that in my reviews. I actually wanted to know more about Aunt Dagmar after what happens and what is revealed later with her chapter. But like, I was just like, I want to know more about her. But I also would love to know more about the whole family, especially the wife of Dr. Ralston.
Yeah.
Because
she's another one I feel didn't get enough screen time.
She didn't, but she seems so interesting. Like, why would she give up her life of, like, on the stage as someone who's very well known in the theater to marry this man and become, the wife of a eugenics doctor and be stuck on an island with children?
To become Mrs. Eugenics and go to the island for the summer.
Right. But I think the icing on top of the cake for this was that we also find that Clara, who is, touted as, oh, she hates Max, she's very rebellious, she hates her life here, like she's willing to throw Max into the water to teach him how to swim when he doesn't know how to swim. She's asleep too.
Yes.
And you're just like, what?
Not only is she
what's
asleep
going
too,
on?
but when Clara wakes up, Clara immediately runs out and she goes to that little pool that we saw the current day cast sitting in and just kind of like vibing in. And she immediately swims down and gets Max.
She knows what to do.
She knows where he is and what to do. And it was very...
misleading.
Yes. Misleading
Very
is a good
misleading.
word. Very misleading way to put it. But I'm still curious about how Clara really knew that that's where she should have been looking.
I know why, but I can't say. So that'll be a text.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you go ahead and you text me. we're gonna sit there and talk about stuff off podcast. Ugh. And then after all of that, you come back. Marlowe found a tooth.
Yes.
Like this middle section just has so much happening in it, and I do want to talk about how much, not necessarily that like how much happens. We're obviously talking about how much happens, but I mean from a writing standpoint, like the middle is often where things tend to sag, and I thought this middle section was amazingly done. There's not a part where I was like, oh, I need to put it down. That all came in the beginning where I was like, oh, I'm a little bored. Yes. I don't want to do this. Okay, yes, this is basically your tourist job. And then it finally gets into the meat of the story and we're just there. Everything is up. Everything is eye-catching. Everything is intriguing. And I need to know, why did they do this? Why was that put there? Why is there a line about the tarp? Why won't Marlowe think about the damn tarp?
And every character in the modern day is doing something that could be taken as shady.
Yeah.
But they're doing it with the reason of, oh, we're helping to search for Dr. Henderson. And so it's just like anyone could have done it.
Yep.
And anyone could know something.
There
But
was,
you're also like, well, they're doing this. Why would they do this if they did that? You know? So it's just like, it really was like a very good mystery. Because normally when you read something like this within a certain, you're like, oh, this person did it, but I just don't know how. With this, it's like anyone could have done this.
yeah. There was a point where I thought maybe one of the Ralstons had like survived to modern day, which is absolutely ridiculous, right? Because they were like 16 in 1932.
Yeah. And it's stated at the beginning that only one survived to like their adulthood.
Yes.
So we do know that one had survived.
Yes, and I don't remember if it's in this particular section, but I think it's small enough I can mention it. But the one that does survive until adulthood comes back and buries something on the property.
Yes.
And that's where the rumor of, you know, like the Ralston's treasure comes from.
Yes.
And we do see that. And we see that before we get a lot of answers.
Yes. Yeah, so it is mentioned the Ralston's treasure in the very beginning. And I think burying something on that property, I think, is mentioned within like the very early chapters.
Yeah, because Tom is looking for it. He's like, I'm gonna find it, and I'm gonna use it to do money and other things.
Do money.
To do money. And that was this tooth. I'm sorry. Right back to the tooth, right? Because Marlowe takes this tooth. It's in my notes.
I don't know why you would touch it, but you did.
Yes. First off, ew, you touched it. Second off, after she finds the tooth, she immediately feels her own teeth to see if it's hers, and then continues touching the tooth. So her spit is on this tooth.
Yes.
And then she puts it in the lipstick that Aquila gave her.
And I think this is another example of jumping to conclusions, because now she's like, well, if someone knows I have the tooth, I'm in danger now. Mm-hmm. No one can know that I have the tooth.
And like, who did you tell, girl? You picked up a tooth and you took it back to your room, and then you stuck it in lipstick like a weirdo.
Yeah, because now you're just destroying evidence.
Right. You touched it with your bare hands, you spit on it, and you stuck it in lipstick.
She could have put it anywhere else, really. She could have put it in a sock in her drawer, and no one would have known.
She could have been like my grandmother and put it in an envelope full of other teeth.
I think that would have been a little weird, to open a drawer and just see like a bulging envelope and be like, what's in it?
Yeah, it would have. Wouldn't it, Mama? Wouldn't it?
But I think putting it in like a pair of socks in your sock drawer, I think it would be harder to tell that there was a tooth in there.
Or like in a sandwich baggie or something. Like, and anything else. Anything else.
You ruined a perfectly good tube of lipstick that you wore once, and it looked good on you. Why would you do that?
And she can obviously never wear that lipstick again.
I hope she doesn't.
I
hope she doesn't. Could you imagine?
I could imagine. She absolutely would. That weirdo. Oh my god. And one last note about this putrid smell. Because it's not something that the core cast talks about until it gets really bad.
Yes.
And I just want to come back around to this putrid smell and the missing tarp and be like, why was it the tooth? Why was it the tooth that got you?
Right.
To this point, there are so many other things that would have said that something bad happened, but no.
And she does mention that once in a while you get some weird smells from the bathroom.
Yeah.
And it's just a quick, simple fix, but this was a smell entirely unknown. Mm-hmm. It was putrid, and it lasted way longer than any other smell from that bathroom.
Yes. And they say it's in the bathrooms where all the tourist guests go, and the smell is also in the bathroom where the staff go and where they shower.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, it's really gross and it's just kind of lingering, and okay, I guess somebody else has to go in there and clean it. And I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. It's super hot, and I mean, I feel like it's obvious that, given what we've talked about, that it's Dr. Henson's body and this dead body smell.
And
in the middle of summer.
As you know, I'm really into true crime, like podcasts, books, everything like that. And there was just one story that just popped into my head when I read this. And they did, I think, a Netflix documentary on it. And it was one where...
Was it the Cecil Hotel?
Yes, it was the Cecil Hotel.
Why am I laughing? It's so gross.
The woman just disappears and they find her, and they looked everywhere, even in the place where they found her. But the smell coming from the water and the bathrooms, that was my first thought. I'm like, they put her in the water thing.
That's what I thought.
The water tank.
That's what I thought. I'm like, she's in a water tank and she's just decaying and you're bathing in her. Like they all bathe in that one girl from the Cecil Hotel.
I was just
so gross.
I was like, that must be the inspiration. And then I found out that wasn't it, but that's where my mind went to, immediately.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thoughts to keep you up at night.
Yeah. Special thoughts from author Maureen Johnson. You could be bathing in dead people.
Ugh. That's worse than using lipstick that had a tooth in it.
Ugh.
If you gave me a choice.
Yo, with that, she then, she just acts more spazzy.
Yes.
After she does that. She's like,
and it's very obvious. It's very obvious that she knows something.
Hey, Marlo, how are you doing? Don't look at my lipstick. What? Nothing.
I think the worst part is she carries the lipstick on her.
She got the tooth.
She has the tooth with her. If someone wanted to fight her and search her body, they'd find the tooth. They'd find that she knew something. Unless the person who did it doesn't know that the tooth came out. So they think this girl's just a weirdo carrying a random tooth in her lipstick.
And the other thing too, right? So the person that does it, I think, obviously does not know that the tooth came out because I don't
think so.
It's not in the tarp. It's not with the body, right? And I feel like that's obvious.
Mm-hmm.
If the tooth was left behind, obviously this person doesn't know that the tooth came out. Because if they knew that the tooth came out, they would have picked up the damn tooth.
They would have searched for it at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just... And the rest of the stuff that I want to talk about, I can't talk about because it's past chapter 20.
So they're going to find this random tooth on Marlo and be like, why are you carrying a random tooth around?
Right? What a weirdo. Why are you...
What a weirdo.
In lipstick that you wore once.
And in her mind, she's just like, oh, if they find out I have this tooth, I'm in danger. They're going to kill me too. No, girl, they're just going to think you're weird and have a tooth obsession.
Right? Oh, and then all sorts of other hijinks ensue, right after this.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't talk about it because it's past chapter 20, and it just gets crazier. But it also does a really good job of echoing the 1932 timeline.
Yes.
And
parallel timelines.
I love stuff like that. I love a good framed story, and I am excited to talk about it next time.
That darn next time.
Because I can't talk about it here because we're only going up to chapter 20.
And I think that is a good place to end.
Yes. On my frustration. Just grumbles, just faded out grumbles. Just rah, rah, rah. That's a wrap on this episode of Booked All Night. I hope you're enjoying our discussion on Death at Morning House so far. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode or interview. And be sure to leave a 5-star review of the show. And if you can't get enough books in your life and your TBR has reached astronomical heights, then join our Discord community where you can get exclusive excerpts, meet other book nerds, and have a chance to sit in on our interviews live. Booked All Night is produced by Rob Cook and hosted by me, Jessica Mary. Until next time, my little Libernauts, this is Jessica Mary signing off and reminding you all to stay booked all night.